Well, hello, good evening and welcome. Thank you most kindly for joining us on today's edition of Daily Politics live on Trust TV. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. It's good to see you again. Now, in a dramatic twist, 3 Nigerian presidential aircraft have been seized this past week in France and Switzerland, caught in the crossfire of a protracted legal dispute between Zhongshan, a Chinese company, and the Ogun State government over the management of an export processing zone. Recent reports reveal that a UK court has also confiscated Nigerian-owned properties in Liverpool related to this same conflict. Now, the jets, valued at over $100 million, include a Dassault Falcon 7X impounded in Paris and a Boeing 737 and an Airbus A330 that were undergoing maintenance in Switzerland, though the Airbus was later released for President Tinubu to use in his recent travel to France. Notably, the president reportedly used it for his recent journey to France. In the latest development, Zhongshan has seized another Nigerian jet in Canada, escalating the already tense situation. The roots of this dispute trace back to 2001 and the bilateral investment treaty between China and Nigeria, leading to Zhongshan's involvement in the Ogun-Guangdong Free Trade Zone project. However, Ogun State terminated the contract in 2016, sparking a legal battle that culminated in a 2021 arbitration ruling in favor of Zhongshan, awarding the company $70 million in damages. The UK Court of Appeal upheld this decision in 2023. Tonight on Daily Politics, we delve into the implications of these asset seizures by Zhongshan and what they mean for Nigeria's international relations and economic sovereignty. Joining me tonight on the program to provide expert insight and analysis is Ambassador Haruna Warkani, a retired diplomat and international relations analyst, and Musa Abubakar is the president of the Nigerian Association of Auctioneers. Gentlemen, good evening to you both, and thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Right, before we get right into the conversation, let's bring you up to speed with the day's latest political developments. Justice Kudirat Kekereekun has been sworn in as the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, becoming only the second female Supreme Court Justice to serve in the position. Now, she was sworn in on Friday by President Ahmed Tinubu, who encouraged her to defend the judiciary's independence and always promote the cause of justice. The president, who returned from France to perform the swearing-in ceremony, is also challenging the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria to strengthen mechanisms for integrity, discipline, and transparency in the judiciary, while pursuing other reforms to sustain public confidence in the judiciary. The acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, on her part, challenged all members of the society to have faith in the system and contribute individually to the improvement of Nigeria's judicial system.
As the head of all judicial institutions in the country, it is a position of considerable influence that demands the temperance and sobriety. The occupant of the office must exude the highest level of integrity in the discharge of duties. This is more so because of the finality of the Supreme Court judgment.
The reputation that it has, we will improve it. We'll make sure that people have more confidence in the judiciary. And I believe that it's not a one-man job. We all have to be on board. And because we all see where the areas are that need improvement, I believe that there will be cooperation, because we all want to see a better judiciary. A better judiciary is for the benefit of the entire nation. Whatever the shortcomings that we see today, we're all members of the society. So if we want to see improvement, let the improvement start with each and every one of us and our approach to justice. Let us all also have faith in the system.
Nigeria's acting Chief Justice Kekereekun speaking after her swearing-in ceremony. Now, governors elected on the platform of the People's Democratic Party have convened in Taraba, in Jalingo, the Taraba state capital, under the aegis of PDP Governors Forum. The meeting comes barely a month after a similar meeting in Enugu is expected to address critical issues affecting both the country and the party, with particular focus on the ongoing crisis in Rivers State. And after the meeting, the PDP governors reaffirmed their support for the Rivers State Governor, Siminalayi Fubara, as well as throwing their support behind a speedy justice dispensation over the recent hunger protests across the country, while calling on the federal government to do the needful and address economic reform gaps. Right, that is our news roundup for you at this hour. Let's circle back to our discussion, which will start in just a moment. So join us after the break. Right, welcome back to the program. Thank you most kindly for joining us. In case you just joined us, let's get right into the conversation, because this past couple of days have been quite dramatic, to say the least, especially on some international developments regarding Nigeria and its legal battle with this one particular Chinese company, Zhongshan, in that litigation around the free trade zone in Ogun State, the confiscation of private jets as well as other properties belonging to the Nigerian government across Europe and indeed in Canada also. That is the latest development. Let's kickstart this conversation with my guest tonight. Haruna Warkani is a retired diplomat and he's also part of the conversation tonight. And I would like to start with you, Mr. Warkani, on this one. As a diplomat, what is your understanding of why we are in this mess?
Well, thank you, viewers, and thank you for having me here. We have come a long way as a country and faced similar situations in the past where our national assets or sovereign assets in other lands were kind of confiscated or attempted to be confiscated as a result of some of these bad debts, so to say. And therefore, we would say the rightful beginning of this has been the improper agreement that we have entered as a sovereign nation, particularly at a subnational level. However, the impact is now at the national level because sovereignty does not rest with the subnational government. And one begins to question so many things. Following the available data in the public domain, you could see clearly that must have been some lapses in the negotiations, in the treaty itself, the management of the treaty, and so far, the involvement of even appropriate government institutions. If you ask questions as to where has been the DMO, Debt Management Office, in all this, has this debt been properly scrutinized? The Debt Management Office, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our embassies at locations where these things were involved, you could possibly see that these things were absent. And now it's payback time. So the nation is embarrassed to a point where our presidential jets confiscated by a private entity, not even a government. If it were a foreign government somewhere, the situation would have been a bit different. But these are pure private commercial interest overriding sovereign interest. I think it raises a lot of questions for us as a nation, and therefore the essence of setting up the Debt Management Office in the first place was to ensure that no subnational or even the federal government goes ahead to sign agreements over debts of any kind of financing without clearance.
We understand that this was a bilateral investment treaty between Nigeria and China, which allowed Zhongshan and the Ogun State government to reach this particular deal about a free trade zone. Would you say that under international law, and what we have come to know is the idea of justice dispensation, whether it's in Europe or in Africa, that they're well within their right to seek redress in the manner that they did, whether it's in England or is in France or is in Canada, wherever it is that they decide, okay, this is how we get what is due to us because of how the Ogun State government or the Nigerian government by extension has treated us based on this treaty?
Well, it is a fact that the treaty, based on what had been written down and entered into clearly states some of these provisions for arbitral processes that could take place, particularly outside the shores of Nigeria. These are some of the cases that Nigeria needs to sit back and analyze better, because in almost all arbitrations, you tend to say it must go to the UK, and removes the sovereignty in us, because now, beside the cost of legal challenges, services, and what have you that we have to engage upon, we are also subjected to an almost absence of sovereignty and political decorum, diplomatic cover, and what have you, having to find yourself somewhere else in another jurisdiction. Because if you are carrying lawyers and what have you to come defend you in another jurisdiction, that's entirely a kettle of fish that ordinarily Nigeria should be looking at. So what it means is we need to be more circumspect and dealing with particularly private commercial entities. I think that's where most of the trouble is. If this had been between Nigeria and China, a bilateral agreement, that could have been managed a little better, because there would have been more of diplomatic chances of talking.
You don't think the Nigerian government can speak to China directly based on, to leverage its bilateral relations and say, listen, we think this company that belongs to you or that is a part of your nation state needs to perhaps reconsider the way they are going about trying to resolve this particular issue? Well, or are those options no longer on the table?
The options would have been and are surely on the table, but commercial interests. Don't forget what the PAID company did to Nigeria. They were all out to make sure they fleeced this nation, even when they were not appropriately incorporated and couldn't operate in Nigeria under regular laws, neither in England. They were found to have been totally deficient corporately as an entity, and yet succeeded in creating fiasco over Nigeria, collected our whatsoever sovereignty, and were almost costing to a point where Nigeria had to pay, if not for the luck that the judge finally saw that there were loopholes. And those lacunas, he was able to pinpoint and say no. Okay. So Chinese government may interfere, but there is a level at which these commercial interests of some of these companies, don't forget, some of these companies are what you can easily call vulture investors. They don't care. They really don't care. And if you look at the details of those agreements, you could clearly see some of the lapses which shouldn't have been part of what we would have agreed to do.
Okay, let's bring in the president of the Nigeria Association of Auctioneers, Musa Abubakar. As a Nigerian, first of all, reading some of these developments, how does this make you feel?
It makes me feel bad and embarrassed. There's no gainsaying in the fact that you see, there are some questions to be answered. First, this bilateral agreement, is it between Ogun State government and what do you call the company? Zhongshan. Or is it Nigerian government that guaranteed the
Of course. So what we understand, if we could roll some of those clips there, is known as the Ogun Guangdong Free Trade Zone project. This was the project.
And they are seizing the federal government.
Well, the federal government is the one that signed the bilateral agreement and is more or less like the guarantor of this particular
if you tell me that, then I can understand. But if there is an agreement between Ogun State government and a private entity in China, and now because things goes sour and these particular companies started following Nigerian assets to different countries and they are seizing them, it is embarrassing. It doesn't make any sense to me, because in the first place, unless, as you said, the federal government is the guarantor of that particular deal, I see no reason why a private company, a private entity will go after Nigerian government properties and be seizing them in other countries. I don't know, I don't know the details of what actually happened, but it is embarrassing to, once you are a Nigerian, it's an embarrassing situation to you.
And in your view, who do we hold responsible here? Because most Nigerians have given their views about the two past governors of Ogun State that, you know, either signed the initial one on the former governor Benga Daniel, and the subsequent governor who later terminated the contract that put us in this particular quagmire where the company feels the need to ask or to seek redress in an international court,
with all due
perhaps
respect,
a court domiciled outside the shores of Nigeria.
With all due respect, you see, if there is lack of continuity here, and this is exactly what is happening to a lot of projects in this country. If I come as Musa as the governor of a state, and I entered into any agreement with any other entity, it is not me as Musa to sign the contract. It's the seat that gave me the leverage to do that. And anybody that comes after me and sit on that seat, it is binding on him that he must take from where I stop and continue with it. But mostly you find out that most times, once the person on the seat that signed the whole thing is no more there, the person that comes in will want to initiate his own personal or interest or whatever. You understand? And that is where we find ourselves in this kind of situation. Benga Daniel was the one that signed the contract. Where is Benga Daniel today?
In the Nigerian Senate.
It's in the Nigerian Senate. Do you understand? And the current governor has to carry the excess budget for something maybe he didn't even know anything about. But whatever it is, whether he knows about it or he doesn't know about it, and in any case, it wasn't during the time of this very governor that the case maybe started, because as I can see, Nigeria and China signed an investment treaty in 2001, 2007. Ogun State and Zhongshan signed OGFTZ deal. 2012, the son was appointed as and look at what is an arbitration against Nigeria. A UK tribunal fined Nigeria $74.5 million. So you get confused. Where are we coming from and where are we going? Right?
You think it's but one bad decision after another?
Of course,
with regards
that is
to
exactly
the investment
what it
deal?
is. Of course, that is what is it. Assuming the person that took over from Benga Daniel continue with the project, and he abide by whatever is in the agreement, we wouldn't have been in this mess.
Right. Ambassador, if we can just circle back to you now, what options are on the table right now if Nigeria is supposed to get out of this particular quagmire? Because it doesn't look like Zhongshan is stopping anytime soon until it gets its own pound of flesh, quote unquote, in this legal battle.
Well, perfectly right. What is left for us is to pay. That's one. Diplomatic pressure can still be mounted and utilized. I think the main reason why Zhongshan was able to bend backwards despite the arbitral awards to allow Mr. President the use of one of the jets to travel to France.
They say it's a gesture of goodwill.
Yes. You read it, gesture of goodwill, which means they still believe in some elements of negotiation. And therefore, the Nigerian government at all levels, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Justice, our diplomatic missions, needs to perhaps do much more. And doing much more means we have to all go out and look for ways and means to sort some of these things privately. In the first place, there would have been no need to allow this matter get to arbitration, from arbitration to award, because there was enough time for the government.
2017 to date.
Yes, there was enough time for government to have sorted this matter diplomatically. But like I said earlier on, sometimes the relevant government functionaries or machineries are never set in motion to do some of these things.
Is this one of
Are there an involvement, for instance, of the foreign ministry and our diplomatic missions in some of these locations, UK, France, America, because this thing has transcended one single country. And therefore it means there would have been need for us to employ, including, if need be, seeking assistance from third parties who may have special relationship with either China or this private company to mediate in this matter. There's no need for arbitration.
Some out-of-court settlement?
Yeah, well, why not? It's cheaper. It's better. It's more honorable.
Or perhaps our government should just learn to honor agreements.
No, learning to honor agreements, that one, like my colleague here has said, is what we should really preach.
And straightforward.
That's what we should preach. Pay. Obey the agreements. But beside obeying the agreements, let us also look at the content of any agreement being entered into at that level. I think government needs to set up including mechanisms, because for now, those who were the dramatis personae in this transaction, nobody is receiving any sanction, not even questions as why did it happen. Those are the kind of engagement that Nigeria ought to, because you cannot allow our part of sovereignty to suffer. And someone comes back home and sits down comfortably as if nothing has happened. I think
is there no diplomatic cover for our assets wherever we are? For instance, say for instance, government vehicles and assets like buildings and things like that. Is there no diplomatic cover to a point where, you know, the courts cannot just simply take them away from us because they are outside the shores of Nigeria?
Certainly not. Certainly, very short answer.
So who's to say one of our ambassadors is just driving there and the driver parks the car on the roadside in London and then they just come and grab the car and say confiscated by the court of law? Because
no, normally there are processes and practices that are established under the diplomatic privileges, diplomatic convention, privileges and obligations. If a diplomat, for instance, commits an offense, let's say a minor traffic offense, yes, prosecution can take place, but usually upon obtaining a waiver from the head of mission in that country to say, your diplomat XYZ had committed so offense, we intend to prosecute. Those things are mechanisms provided for so that instead of going to court directly, some of these things can be settled behind the scene. Now, in the case of Nigeria's properties or assets worldwide, there is no cover that you could easily enjoy to say, this is, I overheard so in the media that the Justice Minister was saying some of these assets are covered by diplomatic protection and what have you. There's nothing like that. It's your sovereignty that you put on the line, and time has come to answer your name. There's no two ways about it. But what we should do is to avoid those circumstances coming up in the first place.
Right. Prevention, as we always say, is better than cure. But let's talk about some of those investment opportunities that we see subnationals get into. For instance, we talk about the treaties, we talk about the deals. Ambassador was earlier talking about debt management and how some of these subnationals get into bed, you know, with these big conglomerates because they see the low-hanging fruits of the millions of dollars that could be readily available today. However, in the near future, it could turn out to be very problematic because complying with some of these treaties or agreements could prove to be very tricky because of the current situation in the country. What is your take on, you know, the whole idea of the management of these deals and treaties over the years? We're talking about something that started some 23 years ago, and to date, we're still struggling to wrap our heads around how this has benefited Nigeria from the 2001 agreement itself to date. What is your take on, you know, the management of some of these deals in this country?
No, you see, if you want to look at it from a point of view, what you need to look at in the first place is it a failed deal? As far as I'm concerned, it's a failed deal. The whole idea is no more there. And now we are paying through our noses. And in any case, where the amount you are talking about now, even for the federal government to pay, is not going to be an easy task. We all know that. When this deal was entered into, how much was a dollar to naira? And how much is a dollar to naira today? Do you understand? And it's a completely failed deal, whether we like it or not. Because if it is a success, it wouldn't have culminated into this. So automatically it's a failed deal. And the Chinese company cannot for any reason invest their money, and because of our sheer negligence, and you are telling them not to claim their legitimate investment. It doesn't make sense.
Are you disappointed that they didn't go to a Nigerian court first?
It depends on the agreement entered. Whether the arbitration has to be a Nigerian arbitration or international arbitration. In any case, you should know, it's just common sense. You should know that there is no foreign company that will come into Nigeria and agree to enter an agreement with any Nigerian company with a Nigerian arbitration. No, it will not. No, it doesn't make sense. It will not work. So you have to understand what was the agreement all about before you come to a conclusion whether the arbitration is on the right side or is on the wrong side. Right. Because if you don't know something, you can't make any judgment on it.
Yeah. Okay. Just before we go on a break, I suppose your professionals, your colleagues in the profession, would probably be looking at this sweet situation from, the silver lining that Zhongshan has taken hold of these jets, these properties. Probably what's next for them is to auction them off so that they can liquidate them and get some money, and perhaps that will serve as part of their compensation for the termination of this particular contract. In the auction business, for instance, what kind of security are we looking at here with regards to this particular deal? Because there could be a lot of people who will say, listen, buying these jets from Zhongshan, for instance, could get us into trouble. What are the chances that if I fly it into a country that decides to favor Nigeria, they might just take it back and say this was actually illegally or forcefully taken away from Nigeria in the first place, or things like that? How easily disposable are these assets that Zhongshan has taken stock of, from France to Switzerland to UK to Canada?
Okay. If you are talking from my own professional point of view, I can tell you that the agency that is the agency that is in charge of auction in Nigeria is the Bureau of Public Enterprise, BPP, that's Bureau of Public Procurement. These are the regulatory agency that is in charge of auction and procurement and everything. So for me to make any assertion concerning what is happening in Paris or in London is me sitting here admitting that what we can do in Nigeria based on BPP Act, the auctioneer in London or in Paris can do the same thing. No. We have different laws. You understand? So I don't think I'm competent or not enough to...
Do you think these planes, these assets are gone and there's no way to get them back?
It all depends on the nitty-gritty of the agreement. You understand? You see...
the agreement has been breached, and that's why
This is exactly what you are saying. This is exactly... If the agreement was not breached, will we be in the situation we are today?
Right. Okay.
The agreement is failed, is breached. That is the reason why we have to find ourselves in this kind of situation.
Okay. We'll circle back in a moment to see if some sort of revival can be done to reinstate that agreement, and perhaps see if Zhongshan is still interested in coming back to the table to negotiate a further deal going forward, where Nigeria doesn't have to face this very embarrassing developments on the international scene about its quote-unquote legal battles with this Chinese company stemming from that termination of a contract in Ogun State. We're going to take a moment's break. Daily Politics returns in just a moment. All right, welcome back to the program. You're watching Daily Politics. In case you just joined us, well, you missed the first half of the conversation, but we're going to double down on this story that has been developing for the past couple of days regarding Nigeria's battle with a Chinese company over a contract termination in the Guangdong Free Trade Zone agreement deal that was terminated a few years ago, leading to the culmination of a litigation that has seen 3 Nigerian jets seized in France, one of them being released, and you might have seen the news story about Nigeria's president flying his newly acquired presidential jet. But of course, more to that has emerged with regards to more seizures of national assets across London, in Canada, and in other parts of Europe. And it does suggest that there's still more to come. Feel free to be a part of the conversation as a Nigerian. I would love to hear what you have to say about this one. This particular development has got a lot of people talking about the kind of deals and agreements our governments at state and federal level get into that might usually end up being a bad deal for the country overall. So feel free to be a part of the conversation. You can, of course, give us a call on the number showing on your TV screen. We've been in conversation with a retired diplomat, Ambassador Haruna Warkani, and Musa Abubakar is the president of the Auctioneers Association of Nigeria. All right, let's speak to our first caller then this evening. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. All right, let's try that again. Feel free to call back. We'd love to hear what you have to say about this one. Well, in the aftermath of this particular development, or this story coming to light, the former governor of Ogun State, Senator Ibikule Amosun, said he's ready to work with government agencies to ensure Nigeria is not scammed in the trade dispute that led to the seizure of the presidential jets in France. He had a lot more to say about it because clearly he was one of those governors that have been mentioned in respect to the deal. But before I get your reaction, let's speak to our first caller. Shamaki is calling in at this hour. Hello, Shamaki. Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us on the program. Hello, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Abdullahi, Ahmed.
Good evening, Shamaki. Good to hear from you.
Good evening, Malam Haruna. Good evening, Malam Musa in the studio.
Right, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, does this country, Nigeria, has a direction to focus by our leaders or leader? It is a national disgrace, just like what Malam Musa said in the studio there. If it's just a company will see all these things that we are seeing on the screen shown on the television, it's a national disgrace. It means Nigeria has no direction. And this will not give room for other countries to have confidence and trust in this country, Nigeria. That is why Abubakar said the president is using Nigeria as a business. In fact, we are tired with all these things. So this story cannot stop saying it. We are tired with all these things. Thank you very much.
Okay. Shamaki, thank you so much for that, passionate contribution. He obviously is very disappointed that Nigeria's name is being dragged in this particular manner. But surely, going by former Governor Ibikule Amosun's position, he thinks this is a case for the courts and we can win them back in the courts. Do you think, would you support that Nigeria takes the legal route to address this? Because there's also been condemnation that the government did not take it serious in the first place, and that's why we keep losing our assets in this particular manner.
Okay, now, are we talking about another case or the current...
Yeah, this particular same situation.
I think there's a judgment, isn't it? Was there a judgment?
They're talking about a likely appeal or things like that.
For how long will you wait to appeal? When was the judgment acquired?
This is most recently, but the case was started back in 2017.
And you allow it to generate into this, and you now say, as a former governor, you are now saying that you are going forward to do something about it? Did you see any sense in that?
I mean, Ambassador, looking at the investment that China is making, and because it's a Chinese company, a lot of people have drawn comparisons with how other Chinese companies, or even the Chinese government for that matter, has dealt with other developing countries. And the only reason why this thing is happening is because Nigeria is one of those developing countries that the rest of the world can take advantage of, especially the Western world, or including China, because we've seen some very embarrassing headlines also about other African countries that have suffered similar fate. Do you think this is largely happening in this manner because it is an African country like Nigeria?
No. I think the difference rather is the structure of these loans. You know, in our relationship with the Western world, for instance, before the arrival of China on the scene, most loans are either procured through the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, and to some extent IFC, who on behalf of private lenders manages some of those things. And in that respect, you will find that the cost to arbitration is not as fast as you would find in the Chinese variant of these loans that are coming to Africa, generally speaking. The developed societies have had their difficulties and disagreements in the past, but when sovereign countries are dealing with private enterprises, there is always danger, because for them, they have nothing to lose. These private enterprises have nothing to lose. They don't have even a diplomatic relationship to manage. Diplomacy is reciprocal. But where you have one-sided diplomacy, then the other party can walk away anywhere. It has no shame. And that is what is happening right now. They don't have anything other than profit, which defines their actions worldwide. And so it's not necessarily just an African kind of setting.
Right.
Now, the Chinese usually come around with different forms of loans to countries. The ones that are sovereign, purely sovereign, China, that is government to government. There are some differences in the language of the treaty.
Right.
In this particular case, we need to emphasize the fact that yes, it's a private enterprise, and therefore, why the government of Ogun State entered into those agreements without looking at some of these nitty-gritties is what we are suffering now.
Okay, let's quickly remind our viewers that you can join the conversation. You have multiple options there on your screen. Choose any of the numbers and give us a call. Let's speak to our next caller. Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. Welcome to the program. Your name
Hello?
and where you're calling from, please.
Good evening. How are you? I'm Mr. Iki calling from Kuje.
Come again.
Mr. Iki calling from Kuje.
Mr. Ike.
Mr. Iki calling from
Ike
Kuje.
from Kuje. Thank you
Yes.
so much for joining us. Go ahead, please.
The problem we have in this country is that when we go out to obtain a loan, we don't study how we are going to use the loan, the conditions they are giving us, whether it's favorable for us or not. Just because we need money, we collect loan without understanding the conditions for that loan. Another point again is that when these loans are brought in, they are misappropriated. They don't have the right direction. And so at the end of the day, it becomes difficult to take the loan because money was properly channeled. The area used. Because they have known that we are financially reckless. That is why they give us loan with hard conditions. Because before you consider the loan, you give specialists who understand the country conditions. And then if it's not available, we reject the loan. Which cannot be done in Nigeria. That is why we are having this kind of crisis here and there from other countries that get more people. That's my condition, my contribution.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Iki. Obviously, these investment opportunities are usually seen as loans, but they're not necessarily directly tied to loans. Although Zhongshan said it has paid the appropriate amount to be a part of that Ogun Guangdong Free Trade Zone, which they say the government has reneged on its part of the deal. Let's speak to our next caller. Hello, good evening.
Hello?
Hello, good evening. Who's on the line and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Niger State. I'm Yusuf Mohammed.
Yusuf, kindly turn down the volume of your TV set and go ahead with your thoughts. Do we still have Yusuf on the line? Okay, I think we lost that connection. Rules of engagement, just to remind our viewers, if you want to call in, please turn down the volume of your TV set, because that interference will not allow for a clear-cut conversation, and we'd just love to have a direct conversation with you on this one. The presidency has reacted to this development. Mr. Bayo Nanuga, the special advisor to the president on information and strategy, said that the company Zhongshan has misled the judicial court in Paris into attaching Nigeria's presidential jets in its judgment against Ogun State. So I think he's trying to distance the administration from taking any sort of responsibility. But before we unpack that, let's speak to Muda from Jos, who's calling in. Hello, Muda. Good evening. All right. Let me just get your reaction to how the government is reacting to this one. Starting with you, Mr. Musa Abubakar.
Is this some kind of a joke or what? Is this some kind of a joke? You have your aircraft seized in other countries, and you are saying that
they're saying that the company is being dishonest about what is actually happening. The federal government might be a guarantor.
So what did you do about that? What did you do
believe the federal government should also be liable?
Look, are we now saying that it is not a fact that the presidential aircrafts are seized in another country? Are they seized? If they were seized, what did the government do about it? What actually happened that led to this embarrassment? You, as the ambassador said rightly, that we need to know the nitty-gritty of what actually happens. Are we the only country? Are we the only African country or any other third world country? Why is it that our own presidential jets were seized? There must have been something that went wrong. It doesn't just happen just like this. You see, the fact is, whether we like it or not, there is a lot of carelessness in most of these deals. That is, the regulatory agencies that are in charge of some of these things are not actually up to tax.
Yeah, and if we look at some of the details there, when the president's spokesperson was speaking, he said the two different set of Chinese companies, right? He said China Africa Investment FXC and Zhongfu International Investment FXC laid claims to the management rights of the Ogun Guangdong Free Trade Zone. And the business dispute and rivalry, he said, between the Chinese concerns soon became fierce, grounding seamless business activities and threatening public peace and safety within the zone and neighboring countries. He also did go further to say that, there are a lot of, webs to untangle here. So the approach by Zhongshan is a rather disingenuous one to perhaps even jump the gun before things are concluded or are sorted out in the most diplomatic way here in Nigeria, and to just go about this particular fashion. Do you think this kind of outcome could affect existing deals as well as future deals going forward? Because I reckon that if the government is being circumspect, it will think twice about some of these investment opportunities going forward, especially one that shares similar nature.
Well, it's obvious that mistakes were made. In the first place, Zhongfu and its sister companies, including rival companies, came here and were challenging the authenticity of even that agreement. You have two separate Chinese companies contesting the same agreement, which means something truly was fundamentally wrong right from day one. And going forward, I think the Chinese government was deeply involved at a point in time, reading through the public records available. Now, all this stems to the fact that we are usually careless as a nation. And like I said earlier, the appropriate government functionaries or institutions were not properly involved. Otherwise, by now, someone somewhere should be answering questions. Why did it happen this way?
In the first place.
Yes, and anything and everything that will involve the use of our sovereignty to secure either guarantees or loans must be cleared by the foreign ministry. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, you will find the foreign ministry being dragged into some of these things. Because like we said, when it comes to confiscation or acquisition, forceful acquisition of some of these national assets outside, you need to involve the foreign ministry and our diplomatic missions in those places. And most of these organizations might be involved at the wrong time, impromptu, without due information, and therefore we will go there and further complicate the matter because you start asking questions that shouldn't have been asked at that stage.
Can we salvage this very briefly?
Yes, very well we can. First, Nigeria as a sovereign has a little leverage over a private entity if we were to exploit our diplomatic privileges properly. It is possible to salvage this situation. Two, from the body language of Johnson, I think they still want to talk. And therefore, yes, some engagements can be done, including, like I said, third parties. Third parties here means there are some professional bodies that can intervene in this matter and bring to a close something more amicable than what it should ordinarily be. So I think that's an area we need to explore.
Finally, if this is a teachable moment, what do you think our political representative in government should take away from this particular experience going forward?
Do we learn any lesson? Do we actually learn any lesson? Is this the first time this kind of thing is happening? This is not the first time this kind of thing. It does not start from this government. I can say it's a continuous process. We are just careless. The regulatory agencies that are supposed to be in charge of some of these things, if you go to them now, they don't even know such a deal has taken place until it gets sour. So we, as a government, I think we need to wake up and be serious about some of these things. It's an embarrassment to this country. Anywhere we go out of this country with a green passport, they are looking at you as a criminal or something. It doesn't make sense. You know, it's the government. To me, it's the fault of the government because mostly the regulatory agencies that are. You go outside here, you see surprises here now. You see the traffic light. You go here just by this traffic light, you'll be surprised. Common traffic light here, we don't respect it. Everybody is in our hurry, going nowhere. So I think the government should try to enhance the performance of the regulatory agencies so that there will be the law and order will be restored. And that's the best I can say about this.
Okay, this is still a developing issue. We'll wait to see what comes next, what assets they're going to go after next. But gentlemen, thank you most kindly for the insight. Thank you for your expert analysis. We do appreciate you for stopping by on Daily Politics tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you most kindly for joining us. For those of you who tried rather unsuccessfully to be a part of the contribution, thank you most kindly for your attempts either way. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. For myself and the rest of the team, thank you so much for joining us on Daily Politics. We'll be back next week live and exclusive as always on Trust TV. Until then, goodbye from me.